Is this a peace deal or just a pause button? The nuclear standoff, it still remains unresolved. So then what actually has this achieved? What is Israel's stand on the deal? Benjamin Netanyahu has sought an immediate and an urgent meeting with the US President Donald Trump. The Hezbollah factor also still looms. Can Donald Trump deliver lasting peace? Meanwhile, like we've been telling you, the Israel factor. Benjamin Netanyahu's government was not party to the US-Iran negotiations. Israel is yet to formally endorse the framework, the peace framework. From Israel's perspective, there are key concerns that remain. And one of the key concerns, as always, is Iran's nuclear program, its missile capabilities and its support for proxy groups such as Hezbollah. Lebanon has also emerged as the biggest test of the agreement, but there is a claim coming in from Iran that in the last moment, the sovereignty of Lebanon has also been added to the deal. Zaka Jacob, managing editor of Times Now, is joining us live on this broadcast. Zaka, you are tracking the G7. World leaders are there. We are hearing, positivity, a positive note from world leaders there. But there are many unresolved questions of this particular breakthrough. The most important one being the question of Iran's nuclear capabilities. In your understanding, how do you think world leaders will perceive this breakthrough that has been achieved between US and Iran at the G7?
Well, look, I think everyone is welcoming it. There's a huge collective sigh of relief globally. You look at the statements that are coming in from the countries in the Middle East, countries here in Europe. I think there's a joint statement that's been put out by France, Germany and Italy. All of the countries around the world, almost in unison, are welcoming the end of this war because I think it had taken a huge toll. Oil prices had shot up, inflation was shooting up, and folks around the world had got to a point where they realized that this is a war which has no winners or losers, in the sense that there is no way that America and Israel can subjugate Iran entirely. Iran has won this war. It has stood up to the biggest military power in the world. It has now shown that the entire security dynamic in the Middle East needs to be recalculated. So the first reaction is a huge sigh of relief, no doubt about it. But if you were to look at the 14 points, it's clear that Iran has won not just this war, it's won the negotiations as well. On the nuclear question, which is the most important question, the only commitment in this 14 points is that Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon. But that is something that Iran had committed to even when the previous Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was alive. He had issued a fatwa saying Iran will not pursue a nuclear weapon. Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, when he was in India last month, I had asked him about it, and he said, we can't go against that fatwa. Iran does not want to develop a nuclear weapon. So that line has been mentioned, but none of the other nuclear commitments, whether it is no enrichment or capping on enrichment or even returning of the nuclear fissile material, about 400 odd kilograms, which Iran has developed so far, none of those commitments are mentioned in this 14-point agreement. And most importantly, I think what Iran has also managed to sneak through in this agreement is that all of these nuclear agreements, all of these commitments from Iran's side go out the window in the next 60 days if the other points of the agreement are not adhered to by either the US or Israel. So some of the significant points that have been agreed to is, yes, the Strait of Hormuz will reopen, but it says under Iran's arrangements. Again, Abbas Araghchi was asked about this last month when he was in India, and he said, we want a small service charge or a commercial fee from every commercial ship that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It'll be a service charge, much like what Egypt charges through the Suez Canal for services rendered. It'll be shared between Iran and Oman, who control, half of the Strait of Hormuz. So again, it's going to be under Iran's terms of arrangement that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen. But right now, like I said, here at the G7 in Evian, on the foothills of the French Alps, there is a collective sigh of relief. Donald Trump will arrive later tonight. It is, of course, on the back of his 80th birthday. It was his 80th birthday yesterday, so the peace announcement or the peace agreement happened on his 80th birthday. He'll be coming here to a room full of collective let's say, applause, relief, and certainly, world leaders will be saying, thank God that this war is finally over. So tonight there's going to be the formal dinner for all the G7 leaders. That's where the G7 itself will kick off. Tomorrow, Prime Minister will be arriving here for the G7 outreach program. He will be meeting with a whole host of world leaders who have gathered here. The leaders of the United States, France, Britain, Germany, Italy, Canada and Japan will all be here along with the leaders of the European Union. So I think it's going to be a pertinent moment, a stock taking really of what this war has really demolished in the last 3 months. It had been over 100 days and I think there was a great degree of fatigue, a great degree of concern regarding oil prices, regarding inflation, and finally there will be a collective sigh of relief here this evening when the G7 officially starts.
Yes, so for much of the world, Zaka, the priority is simple: keep the Strait of Hormuz open, keep the oil flowing, and also prevent a return to the war. But now, let's talk about the implications for India. In the last 108 days, India too has had to go through multiple challenges. Domestic politics aside, if you could tell our viewers about what the larger implications for India would be right now.
Well, look, the biggest implication is that oil prices will go down. I mean, we've had 4 fuel hikes in the last 15 days to a month or so. And any time there is a fuel hike, it's not a very popular decision. The government had held that off till the conclusion of the elections. But right thereafter, they've been forced to increase the prices of petrol and diesel 4 times. Now with oil prices falling, you're already seeing oil prices go well below the $100 barrel mark. I think it would settle somewhere in the 80 region. Remember, before the war started, oil was somewhere around $70 a barrel. India can live with $70, $80 a barrel, but anything that goes up to $100 or crosses $100 barrel, as it happened in the course of this war, that becomes extremely difficult for India and India's oil marketing companies. They were sustaining losses to the tune of almost 1 lakh crore in these last 3 months, and I think that is something that that oil marketing companies could ill afford. There was only so much that they could take on these losses. At some point, they had to pass it on to the consumers, as the government did over 4 occasions in the last month or so. So that's the biggest implication. Oil prices, the pressure on the rupee, inflationary worries, all of that will come down. The current account deficit concerns, that will also come down. That's the immediate and most pressing. The other one, of course, is what has happened in the last week, the killing of the Indian sailors. Now, if the naval blockade is going to be lifted over the next 30 days, then you have the Indian ships that can come back from the Strait of Hormuz. As of last weekend, there were 13 ships, 13 India-flagged ships, commercial tankers that were still stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. All of those ships can come back, and those unfortunate incidents that we saw over the past week where 3 Indian sailors were killed, incidents like that will not have to get repeated now that the blockade will be lifted starting today for the period of the next 30 days. But I think it's important to also stress that all will depend on how Israel responds to this. We've seen a familiar pattern in the last few weeks. Every time we were close to a ceasefire agreement or Trump would announce that, look, a deal is finally getting done, then Bibi Netanyahu would go and attack Lebanon, or he would attack Iran, and that would then set things back. But finally, now we have the 14-point agreement. Yes, it is favorable to Iran much more than to the United States or to Israel. But I think from Trump's point of view, it was clear for a few weeks now, he just needed an off-ramp. He needed to extricate America from this war. Perhaps he got played or led up the garden path by Bibi Netanyahu. That's why he went into this war. Trump had never wagered that this war would last this long, or that Iran would demonstrate during the course of this war that it has all the levers of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz at will. And I think Trump realized that he needs to quickly extricate himself. Remember, America is hosting the FIFA World Cup right now. They go into the summer, and by fall, they go into the campaign for the midterm elections. So Trump can ill afford to keep this going. Inflation was rising in the United States. I think it had crossed 3.5% last time I checked. And that is, again, something that is a big concern for all U.S. presidents. They don't want to be going into election season with high inflation. So all of these concerns taken on board, Trump realized that this is the best deal he could get, and he has gone ahead and announced he will be arriving here at Evian later tonight. He will be attending the G7 dinners meeting that will be hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. And of course, like I said, all other world leaders, that room will be heaving a collective sigh of relief that this war, which lasted over 100 days, is finally coming to an end.
Yes. Thank you so much, Zaka, for breaking down all those details. Zaka Jacob reporting from Evian, covering the G7 there. Times Now leading the coverage. With that, viewers, Time now for us to slip into a short commercial break. We'll be back with more news and updates.